Kim is going to be a few minutes late, Travis.
Okay, thank you. I was just about to say I don't see Kim. All right, well, Bruce will hopefully join us momentarily. I'm going to get us started at 6:32. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Scarborough Downtown Development Committee, calling this meeting to order. We are almost fully attended. We're expecting Kim to join us a little late. We think Bruce will as well. Art will not be here.
Yeah, John Clucci is having to do some emergency repair at the hotel tonight.
Gotcha, thank you. We're missing John as well. So you may notice there's an interface on the screen, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but Tom and I met with Karen on Monday, and we've asked her to, or I'm sorry, at the end of last week, and we've asked her if she would be willing and able to join our committee throughout the rest of our work in both a staffing and expertise capacity. And fortunately, Karen's schedule has somewhat lightened up in the past couple of weeks, and she graciously accepted and has already been doing an enormous amount of work plowing through previous meetings and minutes and collating some of our ideas and some of the things that we've asked for and been asked for. And I'll ask her a little bit later on in the meeting to talk about what she has sent to me earlier today and how we envision Karen working with us moving forward. Let's start with the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Sarah. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yes.
Okay, second by almost everybody. Are there any, we're open for discussion, are there any comments, changes, anything that needs to be fixed? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Are there any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, Dan, let's move into the developers report. What's new with Crossroads?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. And it's just me tonight. Rocky's taking a vacation this week, so he's not joining us. But I had a couple things to touch on, and I could do a screen share. I sent the committee some material over the course between now and the last meeting, and I could take a couple minutes just to kind of, I think I can just probably share my screen without.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. Rather than you having to kind of remember it or imagine it, I sent this along to the committee. The committee wanted to see kind of planned connectivity between the project and Oak Hill. And I'll quickly just touch on that. If everybody sees Route 1 here, the southern end of the project, as part of our traffic movement permit, working with the state, we're actually going to be building a sidewalk from the Downs Road along Route 1 to where it ends today, which is at Millbrook Avenue or Road, which then would enable a sidewalk connection because there's already one in front of Maine Health all the way to Memorial Park and Oak Hill and the town campus. So I wanted to make the committee aware that that's scheduled to be done 2 years from now. So there's kind of phased improvements over the course of a number of years, and that's scheduled to be on the second year of improvements. As part of that, and actually sidewalks would be extended down to Enterprise Business Park too, which is Route 1 south of the Downs Road. Another planned trail connection, I think we spoke about this before, is through some state conservation land. We're ready to make that improvement, but we need to kind of work with the town to hopefully get inland fisheries and wildlife to support a trail connection. So I put that on the map as a potential and one that we're pleased to do if we can make it happen. Working our way kind of right to left. This is a road, a sidewalk bike path connection to Sawgrass Road in the Sawgrass neighborhood. That's likely to happen, if not this construction season, next construction season, because the project's under development in this area, and will continue to kind of develop in this direction over the next year or two. And that connection will be made in the short term, again, as a sidewalk, bike path type connection. There's also potential connections more northerly in the project, closer to the Innovation District with Mark O'Leary's subdivision. I'm forgetting the name of it, but that's under construction right now. And there's opportunities for connections there. They're not designed yet by the Downs, but that would connect in with that neighborhood and then enable a connection to Sawyer Road and that part of the Sawyer Road section closer to Gorham Road. And then lastly, but not least, and we may have talked about this in the past, there's a large conservation land trust conservation property, Warren Woods. And we're building a robust trail system here, which would be trail connections. Those aren't direct connections to Oak Hill, but nonetheless, they're important connections for access to the land trust property. So just wanted to narrate that for the committee. Happy to answer questions, or I can keep moving, however you'd like to proceed.
Any questions for Dan on this map? Seeing none.
I have one, Travis, real quick. Dan, is this available in the resources on the drive? This would be useful for the downtown district group.
I haven't put it there, but I've emailed it to the whole committee. So,
Okay, I'll make sure it gets up there.
okay. I guess my other bit of news is related to the traffic movement permit. We've been working on it for a long time, longer than I want to remember. And we're very close to getting it issued. We're working on a draft. It's likely to be issued in the next few weeks. It's a really big milestone for the project, and establishes 3 to 5 years worth of offsite improvements that range from intersection improvements to traffic signal coordination improvements to pedestrian improvements, and also include funding for transit study. And I know that committee members and subcommittees have talked about that in the past. So as part of this permit, we've committed to providing seed money to study and analyze and plan for additional transit routes that could serve the Downs, but also more broadly serve this area of the project. And that's kind of a key step that needs to be taken first before transit expansion, to the project to Oak Hill occur. So we're excited about that component of the permit, and that would start, probably later this summer after the permit is issued, the study around transit. The other key piece as relates to this committee on the permit is it accommodates and accounts for a large amount of kind of traffic trips, if you will, that are necessary for the downtown. So it's a permit that really kind of activates the traffic side of the downtown so that there's a clear path to move forward. Once we have end users that want to be in the downtown, they don't need to go to DOT to get a traffic permit. We're getting it up front. And that's true for other areas of the project, but it's a key component to kind of attracting a lot of what we've talked about in the past to the downtown and having a clear kind of path forward for those end users. So the third thing I wanted to mention, and we talked about it a little bit last time, is the Redico site. It's actually called American House at the Downs, the senior care facility. I also sent the committee a presentation. I don't want to go through it all, but I did want to show you this slide. And it's a bit of a kind of a black and white, uninteresting slide, but it does show the outline of that location, the property. And it's really only showing what's already approved. That's why it doesn't show a lot of the plans for the center of the project. But this is the site. This is the residential area that's approved and under construction. The grandstand is here. And I just roughly outlined, what we've been talking about as the town center or the downtown. So it's close to the downtown. There is the clubhouse property in between, which is right of the grandstand on this slide. It's also south on the grandstand on the, on the site. But I just wanted to give the committee a sense for location as we think about it. Also in the package is, the site plan for it. Yeah, I've switched the orientation. So I was referring to a spot that's now a screen north of the site. This is the clubhouse building. The grandstand is north of it. And we can get into more detail later, or maybe part of the workshop coming up in June. But I wanted to call attention to that for the committee, and happy to answer questions on that too, if you'd like.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for Dan on Redico or anything else that he's presented tonight?
Yeah, I do. Dan, could you just go back one slide, the one that showed Redico, and one more. So the red is what you're showing as the so-called downtown area?
That's roughly, and I did it quickly, so it's not exact, but I tried to mirror the, what we presented, earlier in this process.
Yeah, for some reason, I was under the impression that it was going to be going somewhat east of that, kind of more into the track area. But maybe that's just my misunderstanding. So the grandstand would kind of provide, be on the east side of the downtown. I was thinking it was on flip-flopped on the west side.
Yeah, and I mean, it can go into the track some. I don't think it would be the entire track area. So I probably cut it a little bit when I put this together. I did this quickly before tonight's meeting. But I think that's something that's kind of a key discussion point as part of the workshop and our work with our consultants. Some early feedback we've gotten is in terms of retail and restaurant to be viable, it needs to be close to the main routes kind of coming into the site. So having it too far east probably presents some challenges in terms of actually attracting folks that want to be in the project that are focused on retail and restaurant.
Yeah, I was just thinking that to the extent that the grandstand is a central feature of the downtown area, it kind of the business side of the building is what relates to this landmass as opposed to the glass facade.
Yeah, and I think more to come on that. We're talking about how if the grandstand stays, how it's redeveloped in a way that doesn't look like that on the business side. And because I think we're going to be redoing most of the grandstand. So we don't need to necessarily live with the business side as it currently exists.
I guess just a final comment, I don't mean to dominate. Has your consultant provided any even initial reactions to the grandstand? I'm just curious what a totally outside professional perspective brings to that conversation.
They've had the same exact comments that many have, and I think Rocky said better than me. It's, what is it? It's not good enough to keep, too good to throw away. So they're thinking about it with an open mind and some creativity. And we have some ideas around alterations to it that make it a more manageable project too, which may include kind of taking out some of the square footage of the building, but keeping some components of it that give it character. So we have some half-baked ideas, and we're going to have them be a little bit more baked by our workshop to kick around with the committee.
You just explained what it means to be a Mainer when you have stuff that's why you need a lot of land to keep all that stuff around. You might need it someday.
You never know.
Hey, Brian,
So does that give us permission to just run with Typar for siding?
I know Brian has a question. I have maybe just a really quick one. Dan, can you maybe sort of indicate with your mouse where that mixed use on the other side of the grandstand, like right there, right in the middle of the track, or on the sort of grand design, you showed a mixed use plot kind of across from the grandstand, separated by a park.
Go back to the connectivity map, the one you started with.
Yeah. Well, I also have this one up that I think I've showed the committee before. So this is what we've talked. Yeah. So Tom, you're talking about this area here.
I guess so, yes. Yeah.
And I mean, this is a little bit different. My line maybe was, where this green is, right?
Yep.
But when you say mixed use, Travis, this older plan showed this as Main Street and really showed this area north of the grandstand tying into the grandstand is really that kind of mixed use Main Street downtown hub.
Mhm.
And as our consultants are looking at it, I think they like a lot of the elements here, but are thinking about different orientations and how to get into that hub potentially sooner from Higas Parkway, and have that hub be at the crossroads of the key roads in the project versus off of a key road. So it's making us think that the downtown might want to be on the northerly end of the grandstand, slightly closer to Higas Parkway, maybe more in, like, if you want to call it, this half of this shape. If that's helping. And I'm talking in very high generalities right now, I realize, but
Yeah, I guess I was more curious about, I guess if we're looking at this correctly, what would be north or above the grandstand of that future mixed-use town center?
mhm.
Where does that begin in relation to the racetrack? Is that?
In terms of, so I'm going to grab this little highlighter. Hopefully the racetrack does something like this.
Okay. Gotcha.
Today.
Yep, thank you. Brian, you've been patient. I know Brian has a question for you.
Yeah, I may have asked it before and just forgot the answer, but Dan, on this diagram, are all of these trees like trees that have to stay, or is there the potential for an expanded road network in the future that, especially kind of in the area, a little closer to Higas Parkway?
The trees indicate areas that are environmentally sensitive. So it's either wetlands mixed with uplands, or stream corridor. So I'm going to use the highlighter again. This is Willowdale Brook. So there's a 100-foot buffer to that brook on both sides of the brook. And there's only a specific location that we can cross it based on our permits. And it's right here. So we have some fixed locations, Brian. This is a fixed location because of where the intersection needs to be to have separation from other intersections along the street. This is a fixed location because it's where we need to cross the stream to be least impactful to the stream. What's not fixed is, Center Street could come in like this instead of like that, which is something we're looking at, and then there could be development, in this location and this location versus the orientation that you see now.
Yeah. And then like down to the right though, like all those trees are always going to be trees pretty much.
Down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's there's actually a vernal pool
Oh, all right.
right here that creates a large required buffer. And this is similar land. It's mostly wetland. It's not, the Higas Parkway frontage is poor, in terms of development opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
Dan, Travis, if I could, sorry again. Dan, have you at all considered a roundabout or some sort of way to manage the connection of those roads? I'm thinking Center Street and Scarborough Downs.
We've looked at that. Yes, we have. We've looked at that in the plan that you see underneath. We haven't gotten to that level with Biddy Clancy. And I mean, the initial feeling on roundabouts in a town center, I think, is pretty mixed. It's not necessarily a super pedestrian intersection. So
yeah,
I think there could be a pretty lengthy debate on the pros and cons of it being like the center. There's a lot of good things about them in terms of avoiding signals and that kind of moving traffic evenly, but I think there's a lot of debate on whether it's like a main street intersection or not.
Yeah, I was thinking that wouldn't be a focal point kind of in the middle of the downtown area, but adjacent to it, it just potentially could give you some more design opportunities in the center of it and such.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we looked at it closely, Tom, in this intersection here. And we're leaning that way when this design was kind of moving forward to avoid a signal, you know, because it could have just metered traffic as needed versus lead to a traffic signal and the congestion that kind of goes with that. So it could find a place in the new design. It may not. We're not really there yet. But it's a good thing to bring up for sure.
Kim?
Yeah, just curious. How many acres is the Redico facility versus how many acres is the downtown?
Redico's just under 5 acres. And we've talked about the downtown being 20,
Okay, thank you.
you know, plus or minus.
Anything else for Dan?
I guess the only last thing I want to add, Travis, is there's a lot going on in the project and with spring and new landscaping going, and I encourage the committee to swing through at some point. Innovation District's looking really nice with some new builds and a lot of the residential being completed, you know, in the current phase. So it's still a construction site, but it's looking less so in certain areas. So encourage folks to get out there when you can.
Dan, can you drive through right now or no? You still have the road blocked?
You can drive to Tandem, which is the newest condo, which is complete and people are living in. I'm pretty pleased with how it came out. So you can drive there. And on weekends, you can drive through. Day to day, there's, you know, it says it's closed and often there's equipment working in the street. So I wouldn't go through kind of 7 to 7, but weekends, I think you'd get through there okay. Innovation is open. So you can drive on in Innovation at any point.
Well, it might make sense if we're going to be able to meet in person at the grandstand in a month, for us to take another look, since you brought us through in the winter to see how much has changed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. If there's no other questions, very informative. Thanks for your report. So Karen, as I had mentioned at the start of the meeting, we've asked Karen to join us through the rest of the portion of our work. She'll be joining both in a staffing capacity and helping us to prepare our final report that we issue to the developers and to the town council. And she's also here as just a wealth of useful information. So often we run into questions we don't have the answers to and end up leaving them hanging while somebody goes and finds them for a future meeting. And I think in a lot of cases, Karen will have the answers we're looking for at the top of her head, and she's also very skilled at finding them. So in, you know, over the course of the rest of our work together, I've asked if Karen can prepare a similar report to the developers for our agenda. But I think that tonight, maybe what I'd like to do, Karen, if you could take a few minutes to talk about what we've discussed, about sort of what we've asked of you for the coming month or two, and what you have done over the past 5 or 6 days with your research to prepare sort of if not a blueprint, then the beginnings of a blueprint of how we might work between now and a month from now when we meet with Goody Clancy.
Sure, thank you for that. And as Travis said, I'm here to serve as a technical resource, and I probably will be talking to some of you, just trying to make sure I'm documenting what you've done in subcommittees before this. So that's my job, is to pull the whole report together and make sure I've represented all of your views here. But one of the things I wanted to go back and do is make sure I understood really what the developers were asking of the committee. And they really told us that in their very first, their first presentation. So I went back and looked at a couple of the different areas that they've asked for feedback on, and thought, well, let's focus on the 2 that seem most relevant to the workshop on the 22nd. And for that, it's really talking about the public spaces, the gathering spaces, and really the Main Street design. And what I've done is put together just some questions to help us focus on really what information do we want to convey to the consultants regarding the public spaces and the gathering spaces. These guys are experts in downtown centers, but they're not experts on Scarborough. And I think that's what the committee needs to bring to the table. And so I've gone through and really put down a list of questions. And Travis, I don't think we're going to go through, we're not going to do the discussion tonight. That's for a different night, correct?
Right. I thought it might make sense to just present it. And then, we have 2 meetings, I think, before our current scheduled meeting with Goody Clancy. And my hope is that we spend the bulk of both of those meetings preparing in advance for what we're going to deliver to them before we meet with them. So my hope is that at our very next meeting, we can try and come out of it with a finished product that Karen can polish and we can approve at the following meeting, which will give Goody Clancy a couple of weeks to look at it before we sit down with them. So I think if we can present it tonight, we can dive into it 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
And hopefully be able to approve it 2 weeks following.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll share my screen. One of the things is I'm going to go through some preliminary questions, and what I would do is invite everyone on the committee to, over the course of the next week or so, if there are additional questions that you think should be on this list, just let me know and we'll put it together and have it ready for the next meeting when we go through the discussion. So give me a second if I can share my screen.
And I'm sorry, I lost track of our time. We're meeting with Goody Clancy at the meeting following our next one. So I think that what we probably will want to do, Karen, is have, by the end of our next meeting, have enough material for you to produce a report that we'll probably want to circulate to committee members, get sign off as close to a week in advance of the meeting on the 22nd that we can. I know,
Sure.
and Karen, I'm happy to help you with legwork if it'll get it done faster. Because at our next meeting, that's our last one before we meet with Goody Clancy.
Yes, that seems correct if we're meeting on, and Dan, we're meeting June 22nd, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the public spaces, gathering spaces, and amenities. So I'm not going to focus on amenities right now so much. I just want us to focus on what do the consultants need to know, and the types of things that I think that would be helpful for them is talking about the downtown. And if the downtown reflects the heritage of the community, what is Scarborough's heritage? Is it fishing? Is it harvesting? Is it the racetrack? Just let's try to think through what our heritage is within the community and how that downtown could relate to it. Again, it's what should the consultant know about Scarborough? What would make the downtown authentic to Scarborough? We're not trying to design a Disneyland. We're trying to design something that is unique, representative of Scarborough, and attractive to our residents. And what I would ask you to think about too is, what does a gathering space mean to you? How is this public space in the Downs going to be different than how we use Memorial Park? There may be some overlap in uses, but there also, I think, is some unique aspects about both spaces. And one of the things that I did do this week is remind myself, I went back through all the comp plan comments that we've gathered over the last few years. There is a lot of reference to finding those places where you run into your neighbor, where you just meet people at random. And so what are the things that would draw people to this space? How is the downtown going to be this special place that people talk about? And in the vernacular of the ULR report, the Urban League Institute, what would make this the place to be? And I put in the winter because I think right now we have summer in mind and everybody's thinking outdoor space. But let's also talk about what would make this the place to be in the winter. And then sort of moving on to Main Street design, which is another category that the developers are interested in. And I do want to come back to this idea of walkable. Let's talk about what walkable means to the committee. And in general, and Dan, help me, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, people usually talk about being able to do half a mile, you know, easily, and things within a 30-minute walk of an area is generally what people think of with walkable. But what I really want you to think about is, what is walkable to Scarborough? And what distinguishes Main Street from Oak Hill? Oak Hill has all the same distances in many respects, but it's not considered walkable. So let's make sure we understand what we're going to see with the consultants on the Main Street area. And I'd also talk to you about really defining what an inviting streetscape means. Dan wonderfully pointed out all the connections that we're going to have from the downtown and from the Downs into other aspects of the municipal campus. So let's think about what that means, how we connect them, what's the streetscape that makes them invitable, inviting, and understand that there's a lot of work that goes into defining that streetscape and financing and buying that's the streetscape, signage, furniture, lighting. Also want to talk about how Main Street connects to the rest of Downs and the balance of Oak Hill. What does that mean for the trails? What does that mean for signage? Are there different types of paths that could relate to, you know, branding of the community and branding of the different trails? We also want to talk about what's unique about the Main Street, what makes it exciting. Somebody said, I think in the visioning exercise, that we want to create something that we want to go to rather than going to Portland. So what does that mean to you? What would get you to go to the Scarborough downtown instead of going into Portland, other than just distance? And then one of the things that I think we really should talk about is, how does sustainability play into this design from scratch downtown? This is one of the opportunities of having a brand new created downtown, is that you have the ability to talk about sustainability, to talk about some unique aspects of a modern new downtown. I would also say we should talk about what a post-pandemic downtown looks like. I think people are returning to normal relatively fast, but I think that it bears some discussion of, you know, are there any long-term design aspects of having experienced the pandemic that really could shape the way this new downtown looks like? And the last piece I again want to keep in mind is the role that art, not Art Dillon, the role that regular art can play in the Main Street design. Can it help define what the heritage is? Can it help define and brand the town? And I think the streetscape art and all of those types of things that are helping in defining and branding the area, those are very important and can't be overlooked in terms of how we go about wrapping up this design, because that's the type of thing that council's going to want to know. Like, you know, do they need a budget for art? Is there a way to attract artists to come and do some different types of designs? There's a whole scale of things like that with respect to the downtown that can really create something that's authentic and uniquely Scarborough. So these are certainly not all the answers. Some of these, I think some of the subcommittees have discussed. And maybe what we could ask is if the subcommittee has discussed some of these things, maybe you guys could lead that portion of the discussion for the whole committee. But I'll stop there and I will get this list of questions out to everyone.
That's Karen, that's so great. Thank you. I would love to hear committee feedback on these questions, and also whether there are any other questions that may immediately pop to your mind that you think we should add to the list. And I want to put you on the spot first, Dan, because you're sort of our ultimate audience. When you look at this and you think about your conversations with Goody Clancy, is there more that you think we ought to be trying to do beyond this list of questions that Karen's prepared? Are there other specifics that you think they're going to want from us before next month?
I think it's a great start. Let me think about it, Travis. I think Karen did a nice job outlining some good questions. I'm sure there's, and I'll pass them by them as well. And any additional ones the committee adds this evening. So let me noodle it a little bit, and we'll circle back with anything that they're thinking about that's not on this list.
That would be great. And I'll also offer to the committee, we have 2 weeks before we meet again. If things pop up in your mind between now and then, send them to Karen and I, and maybe Karen and I will get together in the interim and go through anything else that's come in and determine how else to work it into this list. So we're ready to work through it one by one 2 weeks from now. So
Karen, you mind scrolling up? I can only see the bottom half right now.
Sorry, and I will load this into the chat and email it to everyone too.
That'd be great, Karen. We'll make sure we add it to the shared drive. Let me just open it up. What do people think about what Karen's presented, and whether this feels like a good direction for us to go? What's missing? What do we want to either add or subtract? Thoughts, Brian? I see your hand up.
Karen, I think this is a great sphere of questions to start working on. And I think as we go through them, it'll really help guide us a lot. You know, as I see the sustainability question, one of the things that comes to mind with that one is what impact sustainability might have on what tenants get attracted to the Downs. And so I know we're here to talk about what the citizens of Scarborough want, but I think there's another element about what kind of caliber and quality of users, like rental users, commercial rental users, can be attracted, and what the values of those users are. And I think as we talk more and more about sustainability, that kind of pluses things up a little bit in a very good way. The other thing that I'm kind of choking on a little bit in a not good way is every time I see the word heritage, it draws me to a past rather than a future.
Mm-hmm.
It draws me to a Caucasian past rather than an inclusive future. And I think as we think about what we want to design for, I think we ought to be mindful of that.
Excellent point.
Anybody else? Anything else jumps out at you right away that you want to bring up?
I don't know. Can you see my hand, Travis?
I can now.
I can now. Okay. Two things. First of all, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have Karen on this committee. I think she's going to offer structure and focus that's going to give us some terrific direction. I really feel what she's outlined here is going to put us on the correct path. As long as we're tapping on staff that's available in the town, I understand that and I've talked to them, there's a sustainable group within the town administration. Tom, can you help me out with that? Who that group? I talked to somebody and I can't remember who.
Yeah,
And it sounds like they.
Yeah, we have a full-time sustainability coordinator, and there's a citizens sustainability committee. Yes.
I'm kind of wondering why we don't engage those guys to become and invite them to become part of this process. I think that and this is just my recollection, it seems like the sustainability sort of direction within the town is somewhat limited currently, but the people that you have there are itchy to do more. And I think that they could probably bring some things to the table because sustainability is more than just saving plastic and making use, we're not using enough electricity and all that jazz. I mean, it really is much broader than that. And I would, anyhow,
Yeah.
I'm thinking they should be part of this group.
Yeah, Bruce, that's a fair characterization. The Sustainability Committee is only about 2 years old, and they were previously called the Energy Committee. So they broadened their mandate. Our coordinator has only been on for about the same time frame. So it's fair. They're trying to find their footing and find their purpose.
So what do you think about bringing them in as part of this process, and at least to have them present when we have the presentation from the developers, designers?
Yeah, at the very least, I can have Jamie Fitch, our coordinator on staff, attend a couple of meetings and just get a flavor of the conversation, and then she might have some insight as to where they can add some value.
Yeah, we've chatted a little bit about sustainability, but currently to date, it really hasn't gotten any traction. So
I think to Bruce's point, our meeting with Goody Clancy is not for the general public, but it certainly could involve inviting a few other either town staff or experts from the community that we want to invite. So let's also think about that for our next meeting. If there's anybody else that we would like to join us who's not a member of this committee, but that may have a particular angle of expertise that we could benefit from and that Goody Clancy could benefit from, if we have them join us in a month. And Bruce, I think the sustainability group is a great idea.
Travis, I would suggest we invite Jay, the planning director.
Absolutely. I would hope that Jay would be there. No question. Anything else? Anybody else? If there's nothing before we close this portion, then this is basically going to be the basis of our work 2 weeks from now. Tom?
I just wanted to firstly thank Karen for proposing all of this. I think it is going to be valuable having you on the committee. And in a lot of ways, while preparing the preliminary report that the modeling committee is going to put forth tonight, we are posing a lot of similar questions and are in a lot of ways in sort of a similar mindset as to how to move things forward. So I just, before we get into that preliminary report, wanted to just mention that there will be sort of a little bit of a segue here while we get that report that puts a similar ask onto the main committee here to address some of these questions. So there will be questions that we've already posed that will be coming up in the report tonight that we can add to this before we even conclude tonight's meeting.
Perfect.
So hearing that, thank you, Tom. I think hearing that, let's work through the subcommittees very quickly and move on to the modeling committee's report, because it may be that we end up sort of harmonizing what the modeling committee is going to present with what Karen just did. I would love for us to not leave here tonight until we have a pretty clear idea of what we're going to do at our next meeting because it's our last one before we meet with Goody Clancy. I'll just begin with the communications committee. I received, hopefully everybody is receiving these by now, but a message from Mr. David Rumson. Did other members of the committee, I'm seeing head shaking? Okay, I haven't quite figured that out. Let me just read it, it's brief. I'll read it out loud. He says, my wife and I have lived in Scarborough for many years near the Eastern Trail and really like the park idea. This week's Lakes Region Weekly paper showed the construction of the town of Gray's new permaculture park. I would like to pass this information on to the Scarborough board as they consider constructing a festival/dog park. A permaculture area could be very beneficial to residents. And he said that he could either send more information via email or that we could find the story on the Lakes Region Weekly. He also offered that he has a daughter who lives in Gray as the designer of the park, and she'd be happy to talk with us more about that project. So let's make sure that we share, Dan, you're with us tonight. We'll make sure that we share that suggestion with you to potentially look into permaculture as a feature in the open space. And anybody who's interested in researching it before our next meeting, if you may want to bring that up during the open space conversation, that would be the time. So that's the only message I received from the public. I do want to give John Anderson a chance to mention the email that you forwarded to me earlier today about transportation as part of the communications committee report.
Yeah, sure. I can kind of give a brief overview. So as part of the transportation committee that's also around, there's going to be a meeting on the 27th. And Dan, you might be able to talk to this more than I can, because I think you might have been coordinating with Angela, or she's coordinating with you on having you guys come, I think, to the committee and share a little bit about all of the transportation and traffic work that's going to be done by the Downs. And she had suggested that at the appropriate time, we try and bring that to both groups, so that way everybody's informed, so that everybody has an understanding of the traffic work you guys are doing, how that ties probably into the downtown district committee in terms of traffic flow and connectivity. So I just said I would bring that to the group for discussion to figure out when's that right connection point and when do we want to engage both committees together. Potentially there's a subcommittee here that could meet with that group or attend the meeting on the 27th with the transportation committee. But it just seems like an opportunity for both groups to kind of get the same information from the developer at the same time. So I don't know, Dan, if you had anything to add.
I don't have anything specific, John. I have been coordinating with the planning department both about a planning board presentation on the transportation improvements and also potentially the transportation committee. I hadn't heard the specific date yet, but I'll catch up with Angela tomorrow to get more information on that. And yeah, like I said at the intro, like we're very close to finalizing all that mitigation. So I'm assuming 27th it would be of June, not of May.
Yep.
That would be good timing, around that time to report out, because we'll have the permit and have a clear understanding of phasing and all the things that are going to happen. So we're pleased to do that in a way that is efficient, but also informative. So I like the idea of, a multi-committee kind of presentation.
So I guess, do we want to, is the ask that a member or members of our committee join that presentation and report back, or that we invite that group to report to us here? John, do you think we should ask if any committee members would like to attend that meeting? It looked like there was kind of an open invitation.
Yeah, I think we could go either way. I mean, that's something, Travis, maybe you and I could take offline and
Sure.
partner with Angela to figure out what's the best way to do it. I think it might, actually, no, it won't conflict with this scheduled meeting, right? Because we're meeting on the 22nd and they meet the following week. So that should work if we wanted to have a smaller group of this team attend that meeting just to get the same information and bring it back.
Great. Let's keep talking about it, and we have some time for everybody to think about. We have 2 meetings between now and then. Sort of the scale of participation that we want to offer to that discussion. Unless anybody else has messages from the public that they want to share with us tonight as part of the communications report, I think that we can close the communications subcommittee report. I don't believe that the downtown committee, the grandstand committee met recently. The regulatory committee is yet to possibly never will meet. Holding out hope. So let's move on to the modeling committee. And I'm going to hand the floor over to the modeling committee to report back. And then I think we may be holding 2 potentially similar ideas up to each other that we might be able to find common ground on tonight. So modeling committee, take it away.
I'll take it from here. What would be the best way to sort of present this report? Would it be better if I screen shared or had everybody sort of pull it up on Drive?
How about you share your screen, Tom?
Sure, I'll do that. First, I'll note that I think the timing of this report is pretty perfect, given that a lot of other things are coming to an apex kind of all at once. But the reason we're calling this sort of a preliminary report is I think when we were initially tasked with our duty as the modeling committee was to essentially go out to do these, to look around at other places that have done what we're about to do and try to find commonality between them and use the information of their experiences to inform our own as we move forward through this process. And the one thing that we thought we should be probably providing as a subcommittee was, this final recommendation would be some of the input from the main committee that I think you've been asking for up to this point. And a lot of the questions Karen proposed earlier in this meeting, I think are addressed at the end of this, and kind of gives us the reason why this still has a little bit left to be done. But so basically to kind of go through this, it looks like we're pressing for time here already a little bit. So I'll abridge this the best I can. But essentially, at the beginning here, a little background on the modeling committee, why we were formed, what we were tasked with, and what we believe we're going to be moving forward with from this point forward. Essentially, there's 4 of us that were put together to, again, look at varying models of downtowns that were developed either very specifically in open areas or in renovation situations where a complete revitalization of an area was occurred in a way that is similar to the process that we're about to experience. Our work, we worked in 2 stages, as you'll see here. We looked at these developments. We called it a world tour, was a sort of our internal vernacular for it. We looked at 4 areas, Mashpee Commons, which came at the recommendation of Dan Bacon, Blueback Square in West Hartford, Assembly Row in Somerville, and what is known as, it's basically downtown Boulder. There's a stretch of Boulder, Colorado, that all went through similar circumstances that we're seeing here before us with the Downs. We looked at these areas. We found, we aggregated a load of data to try to find what was common with them, what made them, vibrant, high traffic types of areas, which, we believe would be valuable to the area that we're developing here. Essentially what our research revealed, there's a quick summary here. We, again, trying to skim through this for you to get to the good stuff. We looked at these 4 cases. Initially, we thought that there was, a large focus that should be on sort of the mix of businesses that would really be the driver for a lot of these locations. Those do matter from what we found, but really the success drivers were much more complex than that. Everything from aesthetics, the retail housing mix, factors including event planning, long-term management, infrastructure availability, the ability for the area to grow organically were all sort of important to these areas. essentially, this phase, I think, is going to be very important for us. It's important to note, I think, that a couple members of this subcommittee had conversations with people who were involved in the planning phases of a couple of these developments, and were able to take away some really valuable information as to the challenges that they faced during those, during the years leading up to the opening of these areas. The challenges, as well as what they thought really drove the success of those areas. During those planning phases, thoughtful layouts, careful programming, sort of this inviting and engaging areas. I think that's connected thoughtfully. A lot of the questions that Karen addressed earlier are really what went into the planning phases that, from what we've learned, made these areas successful. Key takeaways from this research: making the effort to design and build a great space is not enough. You also have to dedicate thought to what long-term resources are going to be applied to these areas. How can the programs adapt to make it succeed for the long term? Details like parking, bathrooms, the small details become the biggest pain points from what we've learned, mostly through our conversations. Waste management. I had a almost 30-minute conversation about waste management with the lady from Blueback Square. How is that going to be handled? Who's responsible? Are there systems in place? Who approves those systems? Those types of things are subtle but very important. Places with mixed uses tend to thrive. I think that's where our focus is here. Obviously, this development is going to capitalize on that. Eliminating barriers to use and barriers to access is important, whether that's through handicap access, parking policies, levels of connection, transit systems, whether it's biking on the way in. Some of the places that we looked at had, T-stops, areas to get there, ways to get there that were beyond just with a vehicle. Places to evolve. Places evolve and need feedback. A lot of the feedback that we got was that you should not only have input, we as a committee should have input at the beginning, but there should also be input that is ongoing into the future after these places open. How do we open up channels for conversation as this location evolves? Can we have impact in the future to help basically keep this place on the right track? And then buffers for growth that can help the area evolve organically. I think this topic's come up before in this committee's meeting. I think Dan's touched on it. But basically, if you build it and then the tenants come in, the businesses essentially, you're not really leaving any room for businesses to be attracted over time. It's just kind of once you start, it's very, very different than allowing the place to evolve. So there's strategies for that, and I'm sure we can discuss that as we go a little further into all this. The World Tour, we looked at again. Basically a study of developments with similar purpose and ambition to the Downs. Fortunately, most of these are much larger than the Downs project. So that's going to be a consideration that will come up pretty frequently, I think, from here forward. But these are areas that were built from scratch or underwent heavy revitalization and are currently operating as popular destinations and ones that are sort of regionally recognized and caught our attention while we were looking for places to aspire to, create something similar to. Again, Mashpee Commons, Blueback Square, Assembly Row, and Pearl Street Mall, which is in Boulder, Colorado in the downtown. I have notes on all of these at the bottom. This is in the Drive folder now, this document. If you want to go through the appendix, it's pretty lengthy. We have just an abridged amount of general information that tries to hit the high spots for everything. Notes from the conversations that we've had with the people involved, if necessary, as well as photos and maps to give you a sense of the place. As this is a pandemic, we weren't able to visit any of these places ourselves, but did a lot of work on Google Street View and varying other technologies to try to get a sense of these, as well as the mix of retail dining and other services sort of are all included in this. And again, I'll let you sort of go through these at your leisure. I hope that we were able to sort of put in all of the necessary and impactful information here, but in a way that can be easily digested because it is a lot. Obviously, we've been waiting a while for this report because there's so much involved here that hopefully we've been able to distill it down well enough for everyone. Speaking of that, here's sort of the distillation that we were able to put together. there are key common points between all these locations that we think were important to note that should be, I guess, at everybody's attention while we go into this, the workshop on the 22nd. The commercial mix, the mix of businesses essentially leans heavily into retail and dining. It'd be important to note that all these were developed prior to the pandemic. So their status at this point is hard to determine how these businesses have fared throughout the last year and a half. But the attraction seems to be for most of these, the retail and dining aspect. For food and drink, there are some chains, but mostly it's local, local offerings owned by local people, restaurants that represent sort of regional tastes and are attractive to the local public. All the locations had or were very close to grocery stores, whether it was Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, or something a little bit more regional, which we thought was a trend to note. Retail was mostly, I guess the larger number of retail was local establishments offering niche products. But all of these locations had anchors. Everybody had something that offered high traffic. I think Karen noted, would a Crate and Barrel fit in here? There was a Crate and Barrel at almost all of these. Just location, the types of places that offer the traffic that can then spill over into the other local businesses that maybe don't have the same reputation. Those were important. There's an analysis of them in the appendix, and you guys can take a peek at that at your leisure. There are also services to note. I think we've mentioned sort of the chore locations, the mail, the UPS, USPS, those sorts of places, as well as banks are pretty frequent here, and other co-working office spaces, those sorts of things. They're less frequent than retail, but they do exist and can offer a good mix of activities in these spaces. All of these did have some sort of municipal aspect. They all had either a city hall, public library. They had something that was related to the town, either on their campus or built directly next to it. The Blueback Square, for example, was built in the backyard of City Hall on purpose. And that seems to be a theme that we've discussed before. And this data kind of continues to point us in the direction that may be something that's important. Similar types of businesses, churches were present at 2 locations, hotels were present at almost all of these, but at the same time, these are, much more populated areas where hotels might be, much more of a requirement than here. We'll have to sort of filter our reaction to that based on, some other information. Entertainment, there was entertainment at all locations, whether I think there was a movie theater at all the places that we looked at, which now obviously with the pandemic, strategies may be changing, but it's important to note. And that was a mix of both indoor and outdoor. I think the aspect of indoor entertainment being present at all these places is important because they were all in areas where they would be sensitive to the climate, especially in winter. We want to be able to, we want to have this be a great sort of outdoor winter carnival-esque location, but people get cold. And is there something for people to do inside as well? So it's good to note that all of those had options for entertainment inside as well. Maybe that's because of rain or some other weather issue. All of these have their own website and a management group that field questions, help to deal with the leasing process questions. It was actually fairly easy to just call and get a name of somebody who was involved in the process here just by calling the management group and asking around. So speaking back to the ongoing sort of maintenance of these places, I think that's important to note, and it'll be part of the recommendations later on. All of these host events to help attract people to the location. I'm not positive on how these are all set up, whether they are hosted by some sort of, shared responsibility between the businesses, if it's the management group that facilitates. I know for Blueback Square, the conversation I had was there is a specific liaison between the management group and the city that coordinates the scheduling of events for that area. So I think everybody probably handles it a little differently. It might be something for us to consider in the future. One good note is all locations have a center point or some sort of featured area that's really good for photos and opens things up nicely to allow people to sort of have a center location where they can maybe meet. Hey, I'm going to go to this store, you go to that store, let's meet at the Boulder when we're done. or however that might work. It was something that was kind of staring at us the whole time, was that all of these had one place where you could gather around. And then transportation and walkability were features. They were, sort of prided upon on the websites, and I think did sort of shine through based on what we saw on the ground level as well. Walkability being, adequate benches, adequate lighting, plenty of space away from the roads, so you're not rubbing shoulders throughout your shopping experience. And then what we call sensory experiences. I think when we looked at Boulder, Colorado specifically, they do a ton of programming. On the weekends, there's children's face painting, there's electric trolleys driving around, things that create life within the space, even if it's not fully, hustling and bustling from people. There's other things to allow people to, attract their attention and be attracted and, enjoy their experience while they're there. I think it was also important to know what we didn't find in some of these locations. There was a lot of conversation around, some really exciting central areas like the skating rink. All of these places seem to really prioritize the space that was available for businesses. The skating rink, sports field, other large areas for outdoor recreation seem to be either on the fringes or just outside of these areas, which I think a lot of the designs that we've been seeing from Dan, that's similar to what we're seeing right now. Outside of the boundaries of the area we're working on is where we see these athletic fields and those things. The green space was not wide open. It wasn't, full of concert venues and amphitheaters. It was integrated into the walkability. The intersections were wide. There was space to sort of make your, have room and gather, but it wasn't like dedicated park space, for example. Again, those were sort of allocated to the fringes of these areas. And no large installations for everybody rooting for a Ferris wheel. Again, it seems like those areas were prioritized for business. So important to note, it doesn't say we can't go against the grain, but I think, the purposes of this committee was to sort of see what everyone else has done and understand how to apply that to what we're doing. So good to note that there are some things that we would be outside the box on. The recommendations going forward, based on this research and the filters we've sort of applied it through using some of the tools that we've had at our disposal, specifically the 10 principles of great downtowns. We've been able to make some preliminary recommendations, but again, as we get further down, we will be looking for a little bit of feedback from the main group to finalize recommendations. That being said, I think it's important to note the scope of how these recommendations are. I think we've had a lot of discussions, and a lot of the hangouts we've had is what are the scope of the recommendations that we can really offer. It's going to be difficult for us to really say exactly what businesses we want to move in. Obviously, there are economic factors at play. When we do that, it's up to the developer as well to offer the opportunities for these places to come in. But we can make some, I think, recommendations based on some of the structures that we've seen within these that have headed off a lot of the problems that we heard in our conversations. So working within the scope of the recommendation of where we think we can make recommendations that can really be impactful. We are going to recommend a district management organization, one that can manage some sort of website and sort of the ongoing maintenance of what happens in the Downs. I'm not sure if one has been discussed already. I'll let Dan chime in on that at some point after I'm done here. But that is a very common thread. It seems to be something that is almost necessary, and through the conversations that we've had would be very important to maintain this facility, this project going forward. We're going to recommend a feedback loop mechanism. We've gotten a couple of recommendations for listening sessions with the public that go on a scheduled basis after the project is complete. And that just allows for, if things are maybe not going the way that they have been planned, it allows the public to continue to provide feedback. And again, we can discuss how that might look after this here. Event programming, again, every location we've looked at has all had a way to offer events. And whether that's handled by the town or that's handled by something set up from the developers, I think it would be important to continue to draw people through those types of events. We've been discussing, what does the Winter Carnival look like, those sorts of things. But I think it would be important to make sure that we have our ducks in a row when it comes to knowing how events are gonna be handled moving forward. Again, looking at the common threads between everything, identifying a location that can act as a gathering point and a focus for the Downs. I think that the grandstand is a great mechanism for that. But obviously the future of that is still in discussion, as it was even today. So we would recommend identifying something, if not, a corner of the Downs or something along those lines. It seems like that route in from Higas Parkway, that corner there seems to be a very, frequently discussed location. So maybe that could offer something, but it seems to be something that these places are really sort of begging for. We recommend revisiting this research once we have further details from the developer on the design and aesthetics, especially after the workshop that's coming up on the 22nd. I think we have a lot of information here. We're sharing as much of it as we can, but I think it would be good to sort of filter a lot of what's happening, through this research once we get it here in a month's time. And then recommend further input from the committee on specific considerations that I think could guide some final recommendations. And this is where we tie in a lot to what Karen had discussed earlier. I know in the last couple of meetings that we've had with the main committee, the committee's been asking sort of what can we provide for input. And this is what we've come up with over the last number of days. A lot of it are the big questions that we've been sort of seeking from the beginning. I think Karen gave us some tools today that might allow us to really hone in on that. But we're looking to really define success for the Downs. What does it mean? Are we looking for, a big bustling downtown area full of, a number of shops, or is it something that's a little bit more, a little bit more toned down to, the speed of Scarborough? That I think will determine a lot of what these, what we can pull from these models and apply into this plan. And then a lot of other things to consider, the impact that population density and available land area will have on the Downs project, and how these models relate to that type of variable. Like I said, the populations of the areas that we looked at in some cases were much higher. The only one being lower would be Mashpee, Massachusetts, which has a smaller population than Scarborough. Considering transportation limitations and the opportunities there, we had some discussions on that today, so that's obviously going in the right direction. Who is the target audience? Are we looking for regional people who are maybe coming up to Portland but want to go to Scarborough instead because we're offering something that Portland does it? Or is this something that's more for the neighborhoods surrounding the Downs area? Are we looking to be more adult oriented? Assembly Row, for example, even though they have a Legoland, is mostly bars and restaurants and nightlife. Pearl Street Mall in downtown Boulder, like I said, is more face painting, fountains for kids to run through, a lot more closed roads, that sort of thing, to keep it very walkable, and out of the danger of traffic. Consider make the Downs unique. Consider sensory experiences that can be added to the Downs area while people are walking between stores. What impact is going to have on the public services? We've talked about this a few times. We have some insights into maintenance, waste management needs, and we can apply that information as we get further into that. The sort of the link between, what sort of resources are going to be required to maintain what we're looking for here. Parking has come up multiple times. I almost made it a recommendation to, make this a center point of our focus for the committee here going forward. It's been floated around a few times, but you look at the Google reviews for some of these places and everybody discusses parking. It's always parking is what becomes the pain point. Every one of those locations that we looked at had a different strategy for parking. Some offered 3 hours free parking, garages everywhere, to utilize the land area for business. Some were pay to park right out of the gate. If there's pay to park, who benefits from that? These are questions that I think are a little above my pay grade here. So we'll want to make sure we're addressing them. But it is definitely a pain point. I know Dan's been on it, but we'll want to keep it at the front of our attention as we go forward. And then the last thing would just, how have consumer habits changed as a result of the pandemic? Again, Karen sort of addressed that earlier, but it's a question we've been thinking about a lot as well. Again, because all of these models came out, we're were created prior to the pandemic. So is there some other changes that we should be considering at the end of this? And then once the considerations are discussed, Karen, as we go through those questions, feel free to add any of these to your list so we can address them going forward into the next meeting. But I think that this subcommittee will be, pretty useful to help offer a filtration mechanism to sort of apply what we've seen, what we've been able to present to sort of guide how those determinations can be made going forward. And that's it. That's essentially the conclusion. I would encourage everybody to go through the appendix if you can. There is some useful snippets in here, some fun ideas like the miniature golf in Mashpee, things along those lines, things that haven't come up in our meetings before. But I would encourage everybody to take a scan. Otherwise, I think that's about it that I have here. I'll open it up to questions. I'm sure there's plenty. We've been chewing on a ton of information for a number of weeks now. So if you have anything, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, Tom, first of all, Tom and committee members, this is phenomenal work. I want to thank you all for the amount of time that you've put into this outside of this group and outside of the meetings that you've had separately. I'm looking forward to reading through every word of it. So thank you and great job. The one question that springs to my mind immediately was the difference, maybe there isn't one, at any of the examples that you looked at, did these developments have a relationship with their host community like the Downs does with our credit enhancement agreement that sort of compels a community involvement that may not explicitly be designed to maximize commercial gain? Were there any other relationships with the community that sort of integrated the community involvement in the downtown, or are these all commercial products developed by private developers?
I think the one to note most importantly is Pearl Street Mall in Colorado. I'm not 100% on the inner workings of how they are related to the town, but they have created let me pull it up here. I had the data in front of me. It is a downtown partnership, which is a 501c6 membership organization that essentially helps manage and oversee. There's a board of directors. The public can become members, which then offers benefits such as, gift cards and things along those lines. They have a board of directors, which sort of oversees the area. That location is a little different than the others, where it was originally a downtown. It was a major thoroughfare. It fell into sort of disrepair a couple of decades ago, and then there was a big revitalization effort. So it wasn't sort of taken over by one developer to be made out of scratch. It was sort of a partnership with the town that really created that area in general. That being said, it's sort of an interesting construct. I'm not sure that it's one that we can replicate, but there are, as you mentioned, sort of hints that there's more than just sort of commercial interests at play, at least in that location.
Okay.
Blueback Square. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Assembly Square has kind of a three institution partnership going on. Between the developer, the city of Somerville, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the MBTA. So it's even more kind of non-commercial interested parties involved.
Great.
And I will say Blueback Square was the opposite. It was very much commercial interest. It was fought hard by the public and other developers. There was a lot of drama going into the opening of that location. And apparently, according to the woman that I spoke with, there's a lot on record about that if we wanted to dive into it. I haven't taken the time to do the reading, but I've heard that it was pretty contentious.
Okay, thank you. Kim Bridgham?
Yeah, for Mashpee, when I talked with them, couple of things. One is the developer does a fair amount of focus groups with the community to, get their input on how to redevelop that area. And also sounds like they have a lot of connection with nonprofits. So the town's not intimately involved with the events that happen, but nonprofits are. So nonprofits will reach out to the Mashpee management and say, hey, we want to have an Easter egg hunt, or we want to have this or that. And so they bring in a lot of that kind of activity. But the town doesn't really have a lot of involvement other than issuing liquor permits when they want to have some kind of outdoor event where they need a liquor license.
Thanks, Kim. Kim Rand?
Great job, guys. It's a lot of hard work that you put into this. I think, Tom, you answered the question. My question was there any greenfield like what we're working with right now versus revitalization? And I think you did answer that a little bit earlier.
As you look in it, I did include here, I'll share my screen again briefly. Let me see if I can get to the right page before we dive in. I did include for all of these sort of a map of the area. So you can look, you can blow this up if you'd like, this is still editable, but if you look at sort of this is Mashpee Commons, this is sort of the structure of where the commercial space is. And then all of the green space sort of is, in a lot of ways ancillary. I think this is sort of answering your question, Kim, but this is Blueback Square, again, public park, but it's sort of off the edge. And this isn't actually within the Blueback Square area.
Yeah.
This kind of was there and they built next to it.
I think my question was more, I understand the green space, but you mentioned that I think the place in Boulder was a revitalization. What about Mashpee Commons and the one and the other three? Would they net new developments? Like, because they all seem to border municipalities or something like that. But was it just like green land before they built on it, or were there buildings there before? Or
I believe, and I think Dan is a little more intimate with the beginnings of Mashpee Commons. That was a shopping plaza that was completely redone. Okay. Assembly Row, which I think we're on here, it's kind of interesting. I think it's a mix of both. I think there was a lot of demolition and rebuilding done because as you're clicking through sort of Google Street View, buildings will disappear and then reappear new kind of thing. So you can tell there's been a lot of work there, but I don't think anything was in the way that we have it, sort of an empty field ready to be built upon. So we are in that way in a unique circumstance.
Thanks.
Dan?
Yep, thanks. And I would echo everybody's comments. Awesome job, Tom and the rest of the committee. I was just going to comment on Blueback Square, and I know you've been doing a lot of research and I know less, but I did understand that started largely as town land, and then there was like a bond issued to kind of start the project. And the only reason I bring it up is I think pretty much all of these had pretty big town participation in one way or another, whether it's zoning or bonds or land or redevelopment. They probably all did it a little bit differently, but projects like this all kind of generally need the type of partnerships that we have right now. And you're right, Tom, Mashpee Commons was like an old Stop and Shop or an old kind of strip plaza that then from the 60s, I think that got converted to what it is today.
Any other questions, reactions? I think considering the hour, and I know how much Tom has been willing to give of himself outside the committee, maybe I'll ask you for a little bit more. If maybe Tom and Karen and I can get together in the next week and hold up these materials against each other and see if we want to recommend what we want to incorporate. I immediately saw some items that I think are excellent questions that should be part of what Karen has presented. The governance model seems like it is absolutely a make or break long-term solution that needs to be figured out sooner than later. So that, that among a few other things. So, maybe Tom and Karen and I offline can set up a time to talk, and we'll circulate something to the committee in the next week so everyone has a chance to look at it and think about it and be prepared to dive into this list of questions top to bottom at our next meeting. If anybody else has anything to ask or mention on the modeling committee report, let's do it now. Otherwise, I'd like to go into agenda setting.
We just formally recognize the members of the modeling committee. I know it's Tom and Kim.
And Bruce and Brian, I think.
Correct. Yep.
Excellent. Terrific job.
Great work, everybody. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing about what Tom had presented? I think it's, and it was really an effort by more people than me to come up with this really great report. And I think that I'm trying to marry two ideas here together. One is what Karen said earlier, is that, you know, we're trying to make this this project unique to Scarborough. And the answers that the modeling committee put together were answers that represented correct answers for other types of towns. I think we might have to do a little reverse engineering with some of these answers. I mean, these are answers in many cases, but not answers for Scarborough. But what they do is respond to a question. And I think that the question needs to be asked and then answered again, but with Scarborough in mind. So I think when people look at this, that they shouldn't look at this with the idea that, yeah, this is, maybe we should do this. It worked for somebody else, but not necessarily for us. So we just have to ask, what was the question that led to that answer? And think about how Scarborough relates. And that's really all I wanted to say about it.
It's a great point, Bruce. Thank you. And I think that was what a lot of Karen's questions seek to find. That's our mission exactly. For the agenda for our next meeting, I would like to ask that no subcommittees meet in the interim. Sorry, I know how much you love giving up an extra Tuesday, but I think that we should focus. Brian, should we get the regulatory committee together next week?
Let's get the team together. Come on, man.
I think that we should spend our next meeting focusing on working through the list of questions to prepare in advance of reporting to Goody Clancy. And so aside from a developer's report and a SEDCO report, the bulk of that meeting should be working through that list of questions. And I think before we meet, we'll circulate something final for everybody to spend some time thinking on. Is there anything else that folks think we need to talk about at our next meeting? Remembering that the meeting following that is with Crossroads and Goody Clancy.
There was some interest in sustainability. I mean, I can, maybe it's best to bring them into the workshop, but if there's any interest in, they might be not productive at the next meeting, given your task.
I do think, to your point, Tom, the one thing that we should make sure we cover probably following our work is who else we may want to invite with us.
I'll include that on the agenda just so it's a prompt.
It should be its own item. Thank you.
Yep. Could I just ask a housekeeping matter? I see. I'm sorry, Sarah's got her hand up. Let's go there first.
Sure, go ahead.
Mine was actually going to be housekeeping as well, and just maybe just a point of clarification. Is the goal for next meeting for us to just come with ideas to answer those questions, or do you want us to submit those to you over the next 2 weeks, and we can use the time in the meeting to sort of see where there's similarities?
I think that probably the goal is for us to work through answering those questions together.
Okay. You have a visitor.
And we have a public comment tonight. And then in the interim, within a week or so, we'll try and prepare a document to circulate to the committee.
Okay.
Unless and again, this is just me thinking out loud. So if anybody has different thoughts or thinks that what Sarah has suggested might make more sense, certainly floor is open to discuss it. What does everybody think? Do we want to do this all in person, or do we want to ask committee members to send answers in advance? I see value in it. Brian?
Yeah, I wonder if there's I don't know how comfortable people are like collaborating on a document together, but if folks are comfortable with it, if there is a way to collaborate on a Google Doc, just kind of adding our own answers or our own thoughts, and then we can sort of see what each other's saying, and then get a little bit of momentum for a conversation to get a little deeper during the meeting. Otherwise, I kind of worry that with the limited time that we have together, we will really just be spreading the cards on the table and not really doing the deep dive that some of the stuff merits.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more I think about it, it's a really good idea for us to either populate a Google Doc or send in an email, preliminary thoughts to those on those questions that we'll send a final version of.
Let's do a Google Doc so it can be populated by the group,
Great.
kind of real time. And
Great.
if you see if you can read the other suggestions and your comment is already included, you don't need to include it.
Maybe plus one or something.
Somehow indicate that you're in agreement. Just so we can sort of see that there's multiple voices saying the same thing. That's helpful too sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll send more instructions and reminders on how to work with that Google Doc, and maybe we'll come up with a format where people can easily add a checkbox with their name or a +1 or some means to represent that an idea is sharing a lot of agreement. So I think that Karen and Tom and I will get together. We'll produce a final document. We'll circulate it around in a Google Doc, and we'll ask folks to populate it before our next meeting with a few reminders. And then at our next meeting, we'll open it up and we'll work through it together.
So just a housekeeping matter, with the changes to the governor's guidelines and US CDC, we're available and open for business for in-person meetings. We're still working out some technology issues. Going forward, we want to be able to kind of host these hybrids so folks can be remote, at least the public can be remote. And really the beauty of streaming live on YouTube is something that we really need to maintain. So I don't have that kind of technical patch in place yet. It's still a little clumsy. So I might suggest if this committee, and this is my recommendation for others, if it's working for us, we stay remote until we've got to get that part of it perfected. It sounds like we are going to get together in person for the workshop, which is not too distant.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Tom. And I would love it if we can meet in person a few times before this is over. But,
Sure.
Only if you have a good protocol and everyone's comfortable.
So let's plan on the next one being remote, and I'll give you an update then. Okay.
Great. Excellent. I think we got a full agenda, but is there anything else that we think we need to cover at our next meeting? Seeing none. I see no attendees.
There is one behind you.
We do have one member of the public, a gadfly, I suppose, who's come back to offer more public comments. I'm going to welcome her up now. You can speak loud and clear, right? To tell everybody your name.
My name is Aya, and I have an idea for downtown Eden. For downtown, I thought we could put a garden place in a downtown.
A garden in the downtown. Okay, well, you know what? We have some meetings in the next couple of weeks where we'll talk about exactly that. So thank you for your comments. It's been very helpful. Okay, I see no other comments. Tom, unless I'm missing something, I think that was our only public comment tonight.
You are correct.
So in that case, this is the latest we've ever gone. I welcome a motion to adjourn.
Making history. So moved, Travis.
We're adjourned. Thanks for giving us your Tuesday, everybody.
Thank
We'll
you.
be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Hey,
guys.
guys.
Good job.